welcome to the show with me, Gillian Gottsell. I'm doing a mini series of interviews on women raising in Web3, how they do it, the problems that they face, issues, positives maybe as well. And as part of this process, I'm very pleased to welcome Bridget Greenwood, who is the founder of The Bigger Pie and co-founder of the 200 Billion Club, to come and answer some questions. Bridget, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
No, I'm delighted because although you have not raised money as a founder, with the 200 Billion Club, you are addressing that direct issue where there's not enough women founders receiving money. So perhaps could you state the problem that faces, and maybe some stats about that face women trying to raise money from VCs and from other angel investors?
Absolutely. So the issue that we have is that there seems to be a very strong unconscious bias in the VC process and the VC system. It exists everywhere in our lives, so there's no surprise that it also exists in the VC world. Now, through the work I was doing with The Bigger Pie, and I want to see how we can get more gender equality and those people who are fantastic at what they do, to have the same opportunities as their male counterparts. That's when I discovered that 3% of all VC funding goes to female teams, 8% goes to mixed teams, and the rest go to all male teams. That was pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, it's actually gone down. So the number it's 1.5% that is going to female founders.
Why is
it going backwards and not forwards? So there are a couple of ideas and thoughts around why that is. In the time since the pandemic, we have seen, we've definitely seen what happened last year in terms of the bad actors and the consequences of the highs that we had, FTX, et cetera, et cetera. So there's not as much money that is going around at the moment. We also have, outside of the crypto world, financial issues and difficulty, and money is more expensive now to borrow. So in these times, what VCs are doing is falling back onto what they know. And what they know is, the 90% of their portfolio, which tends to be male founders. So that seems to be the negative consequence of, actually, why don't we double our efforts down onto the people we already know and we're investing in, rather than taking that risk into new founders. So I think that's largely what's going on with that, which is frustrating for many reasons, including the fact that we have a lot of data research out at the moment that talks about actually what happened during COVID, what happens during, financially difficult times when there's an awful lot of change. And it's a feminine leadership style that is best suited in these climates. But transferring that data into the unconscious mind of individuals, male or female, is a little bit more tricky.
Wow. So tell me the thinking behind the 200 Billion Club and why is it named? Where does the name come from?
So Alison Rose, our CEO of NatWest Group, RBS, she was invited by the government to do a report on women entrepreneurship in the UK. And one key point of the report said that if we were to invest in female entrepreneurship in the same way as best of class countries do, we could add 200 to 250 billion pounds to the UK GDP. So that's where we got the 200 Billion Club from.
Wow. Okay. So in forming the 200 Billion Club, so you've stated the market's only 3%, now down to 1.5%, which is frightening. Actually, it's so small. What can we do? What can you do to change that?
So I co-founded it with Dr. Amber Gadar, and we went on a 3-month research journey. So we spoke to academia, we spoke to investors. Amber herself has been through the raise and the process herself as a female founder. And we looked at the information and research that is out there. And there were 2 key points that we felt that we could address that will help to move the needle in a positive direction, to be able to get VCs and female-led startups sort of connected and have that deal flow happening. The first one is you need a warm introduction. A lot of the VC world is all about networking, and they ask each other what do they think of other founders, and networking is a key part of that, which is fine. But if that network is a boys' club, how do the women get the doors open? So we now have 200 plus VC partners that work with us at the 200 Billion Club. We understand each of their investment thesis, and then when the founders come through our cohorts and they intelligently match that investment thesis, then we'll put them in front of the VCs. So we're opening that door for them and giving that warm introduction. The second part, which is a bit more difficult to overcome, is during the pitching process. So as soon as you show up and you reveal your identity and you do your pitch, then this is where the unconscious bias comes into play. So we're all exposed, to the same media, the same cultures, etc. And so women as well as men fall prey to the unconscious bias. So a very famous research printed in the Harvard Business Review said, effectively, men are asked promotive questions. So that's focusing on the opportunities of the startup. Whereas women are asked preventive questions, which is focusing on the risks and putting yourself in a defensible position. Why is that important? Because no matter who you ask, male or female, if you ask preventive questions, 5 times less likely to be able to raise than if you ask promotive questions. So we tend to find male or female VC. If you're a female founder, you're asked preventive questions. Now, the good news is when you understand and recognize the preventive question and you're prepared and you know how to answer it in a promotive way, then you can bypass this unconscious bias.
Ooh.
So you can give yourself a much better chance of being able to be on the same playing level. So that's really key.
That's interesting, because I was thinking, because it's very hard to change the VC, for example, but if you were the founder and you want to get through it, so do you help your cohort, people who come to you for the incubation process, you help them to recognize a preventive question and to flip it? So
absolutely,
right,
it's part of the coaching process that we do. So you need to know everything that you need to know to tell a VC the information that they need to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, why it should be you, what the market share is, what your go-to market is, etc. Everyone needs to say that regardless of their gender. But when it comes to women, you need to do a couple of extra things as well. So one is understanding promotive and preventive questions, and then being able to respond in a promotive way.
That is huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the second key point is another piece of research that was done called Don't Pitch Like a Girl. They said, okay, so we've seen that there is research out there in the VC pitching process when it comes to gender. Are there any other factors to play that we can have a look at? And effectively, they had 4 types of founders. They had male founders with masculine traits, male founders with feminine traits, female founders with masculine traits, and female founders with feminine leadership traits. And no surprise, if you're a male founder with masculine leadership traits, the VCs much preferred you. But second was female founders with masculine leadership traits. So a masculine leadership trait is much more combative, much more aggressive, much more about competition. Whereas feminine leadership traits are much more about collaboration. And sort of the softer skills side of things as it might be considered. So it's about matching what the VC wants to hear in terms of the content, but also in terms of how you deliver it in the context of that. So women tend to be they're really happy to talk very positively and boastfully about their team. They're much more reserved about themselves. But if you're the one that the VC is investing in, then they need to be able to hear from you how bullish you are, how confident you are. And you really need to tell them and be explicit about what you've achieved and why you're right for this. So we help women to do this. It seems to come much more naturally to men. And that's quite interesting. The language that women use as well is more, it could. Whereas men will be, absolutely, we can do this, regardless, the outcomes are the same in terms of, but the delivery of the language is key. So VCs are looking for that much more assuredness, much more masculine style leadership sort of language. So that's also something else that we work with them. And it's interesting because you'll see our founders get the script, they've learned, they learned their pitch, 5-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute pitches, because you have different lengths for different parts of the stages of the conversation. And they've got the right language, and then they're asked a question and they fall back into the feminine leadership style. So it's making sure again that they're prepared for all the questioning and all the answering, both from preventive and promotive styles, and also from the leadership style. Interesting.
So finally, Bridget, when women do get funding, I'm sure you know the answer to this. Is there data or stats to say that women produce a bigger return or a greater return or more safe hands? Is there any figures to say apart from diversity,
yes,
what are the outcomes?
Yes. So there are many reasons why underrepresented, overlooked, underfunded founders, including female founders, should get a better shake from the VC. So the Boston Consulting Group turned around and said, generally women get half the funds and produce twice the profits. And now when we're looking at the fact that, there's not as much money being put around, and people are looking at how do we deliver profits and how can we do so on a much tighter budget, this is right in the fast lane of female founders and what they've done in the past. So that's really interesting. So yes, it would be great that female founders get the right amount that they need to be able to go off and to thrive in their startup. But we know that the data supports that they're much more conservative with their spend, which leads to greater profits pound for pound.
It's very interesting. If people want to find out more about, especially the 200 billion club, where can they go, and why would they come to you?
So we'd love to hear from any angel investors, any VCs, anyone who is looking for pre-vetted deal flow with underrepresented founders. We've got our Web3 cohort that is already launched. Last year we did a sector agnostic cohort, but for those in the Web3 world, we're doing a Series A, and then we're looking at pre-seed to Series A in Web3. So if you're looking for great investment opportunities, please reach out to us. Or if you're a founder who is looking indeed to be able to have access to VC funding, then we can come. We'd love to hear from you and see if you're right fit for our cohort. If you go onto the website www.the200bn.club, then all the information's on there, and you can reach out to me as well on LinkedIn. Bridget Greenwood.
Thank you so much for your time, and let's get that percentage significantly higher in the next year.
Yes, and let's get more profits for everyone in the meantime.
Totally. Thank you so much for your time, Bridget.
My pleasure.
Bridget Greenwood, founder of The Bigger Pie and co-founder of the 200 Billion Club. Thank you.